Hey everybody, Eric Grenier here with Philippe J. Fournier for today's episode of The Numbers. Philippe, we are finally into this final week of the campaign.
Right.
7 days to go before Election Day. Are you ready to call it? Is it over?
Well, you know the answer to that. We're never ready to call it until it's done. However, Eric, we will get into the newest numbers, and we have a lot this morning to décortiquer, as we say. But first, how are you holding up? And are you ready for this last sprint, this last 7 day sprint?
I think so. Holding up pretty well, I guess. It is going to be a busy final few days, and very curious to see what the numbers are going to show over the next little while. And we do finally have, as you mentioned, quite a few polls that are coming out. It was pretty quiet over the long weekend, and now we're starting to see more of those numbers, including some polls that were published or conducted since the last debates and over the weekend. And, you know, we do have to think about whether weekend polls over the long weekend are going to have some anomalies. But for the most part, the numbers that we've seen published over the last 24, 48 hours look a lot like what we saw before.
Oh, yeah.
So with the sole exception of Main Street Research, which we can talk about, most of the polls are still showing the same kind of picture we've seen for the last little while. So we've got polls from Nanos, Liaison. This morning we have Poilievre, Research Co., MQO, and Main Street. And with the exception of Main Street, they're all showing a lead of 5 to 8 points for the Liberals. Pretty clearly 44 to 43% support for the Liberals, somewhere between 36 to 38 for the Conservatives, and between 8 and 11 for the NDP. Main Street is the one that's on its own, 41 apiece for the Liberals and the Conservatives, and 6% for the NDP. Since we've gotten lots of questions about it, I'm sure you have and I have as well. What do you make of the fact that we do have that difference in some of those numbers right now?
Well, the easiest explanation would have been the mode of polling, but that's not applicable anymore since Main Street switched back to IVR, to those people call it robocalls. I don't like it, but IVR. So we had a poll a few days ago from Palace Data that showed basically the numbers we see this morning. We see Liaison Strategies, which uses IVR 43-37 this morning, so 6-point lead. As we all know, Nanos does live caller, and this morning Nanos has an 8-point lead for the Liberal, 44 to 36. Then we have the online panels. You mentioned MQO. MQO I received it like an hour ago, so I guess it's new. Also an 8-point lead. And Poilievre, which uses a mix. Poilievre, I know, does daily polling for the Curse of Politics, but on Sundays or Mondays, they do release their latest numbers. And this morning from Poilievre, it was 44 Liberal, 36 Conservative, 8 NDP. So perhaps we were just seeing a little bit of noise. The tightening of the past few, I wouldn't say few days, maybe 10 days, happened in Quebec. The Bloc is polling better in Quebec. Hasn't completely recovered though. But what do you make of what we're seeing right now? I mean, you joked, are we ready to call it? But there's a clear Liberal advantage here, according to the polls, right?
Yeah, and that hasn't really gone away. While I think we haven't seen as many 45s or 46s in a little while for the Liberals, it's now we're getting more often that 43 and 44. And Main Street does have that closer race, but they've had the closer race throughout this campaign.
That's right.
So either they're seeing a different reality than the other pollsters, and maybe they're the ones who are right and everybody else is wrong. But when you have this morning 6 polls that are published, 5 are showing a 5 to 8 point lead, 1 is showing a tie. You have to kind of balance it out and think that things are closer to that 5 to 8 point lead.
Yeah.
But I do think there is a tightening of some kind. If you look at the polls from the 3 trackers, which, you know, they were in the field the 3 days before the debates. They've been in the field for the last 3 days. You see that the Liberals are down a bit. They're down between, on average, about 2 points, okay, from where they were before the debates. But the Conservatives are actually also down. They're down about 1 point. So the net effect is that there is a 1 point reduction in the margin between the Liberals and the Conservatives, which means that instead of the 6-7 point lead we had before, it's a 5 point lead, which is still more than the Liberals need by far to win that majority government. I do think the NDP maybe came up a little bit. Nanos had them at 11 today. And as you said, the Bloc as well, starting to come up a little bit, getting into the mid to high 20s rather than the low to mid 20s. So that's it. And that's not really enough to change the projection from a majority to a minority for the Liberals. They're still well above the threshold needed to get that majority government.
Define well above. Like, what do you have? Like 20 seats of cushion?
This morning I do have 194.
Okay. I have 184. But that was early this morning. I did not include all of these numbers that just came out, and of course that would help the Liberals. The numbers we saw this morning would help the Liberals. Thing is, if you have a 12 to 15 seat cushion in majority territory, doesn't take much, man. Doesn't take much. The NDP recovers a bit in BC. Conservative do a little bit better in Ontario, not dramatically, just a little bit, and the Bloc does a bit better in Quebec, and suddenly you're in the 170 range. So I would say with what we're seeing right now, the Liberals have to be overwhelming favorite to win the most seats. But majority is tough to reach. They have to perform well everywhere, basically. Even in Atlantic Canada, where Mark Carney is in the he's going to do 3 provinces in Atlantic Canada today. So I'm guessing that's like not the farewell tour, but the opposite of a farewell tour, like the thank you tour. He's going to go from east to west in this last week. I'm guessing they think they have this in the bag if they go into Atlantic Canada, and so I don't know. The majority is tough to call the majority, but right now the Liberals, according to the polls, even Main Street's, by the way, Main Street shows a seat projection on its website, and even with a tie, they have the Liberals ahead in the seat count. So it's pretty unanimous right now, and it would take a massive error to see the Conservatives win the most seats with these numbers.
Yeah, no, I definitely see that. We could see by the end of the week that things could be, as you said, in minority territory, or at least more in a question. For me, the numbers do suggest pretty strong majority position right now, especially because of what's in Ontario. Just the numbers, and I didn't even add some of them today yet because the MQO and the research poll came out after I published my update.
Yeah.
But Nanos had a 10-point lead for the Liberals in Ontario.
Yeah.
Liaison had a 13-point lead. Poilievre had an 18-point lead. If the Liberals are winning by double digits in Ontario, I think they get that majority, in part because they win 85 seats in Ontario or so. Quebec has come down a bit, and I think that might be one of the sources of our differences. How many seats right now do you have for the Bloc?
In Quebec, I have, I think, 23 seats for the Bloc.
Okay, well, that's not a huge difference. I have 21.
21.
So
the thing is, I really, with the way it's going, and the end of campaign, Yves-François Blanchet, we mentioned it on Saturday in our special episode, but Yves-François Blanchet is openly campaigning, saying to Quebecers, Carney is going to win. So you can comfortably vote for the Bloc Québécois to give us better representation in Ottawa. We know it's partly spin. He's not wrong that Carney is the favorite right now, but we know it's partly spin to tell Quebecers, maybe vote switchers, say, it's okay. Carney's going to win. Come to us. And if it works, I could see the Bloc win 28 seats, maybe even 30. And those seats would come directly from, most of them would come directly from the Liberals in the seat projection. I have the Conservatives at 12 in Quebec. I'm not sure anymore. If the Bloc goes back up, they had 10 in the last election, so 12 would be a gain. Not sure anymore if the Conservatives get up to 12 in Quebec with those numbers.
Yeah, we'll have to see if we see some more polls with the Bloc being a bit higher. I still have them only at 25% in the province.
Yeah.
And if they do come up, then the Liberals drop down to 40 seats, maybe below 40 seats, and then I get into the 180s as well. So I don't think we're that far apart in that sense. But for me, it's just the fact that the Liberals still have that lead in Ontario, and they're still holding the lead on average in BC. We see a few polls now and then that have the Conservatives ahead. Yep. But in general, the Liberals are ahead in BC. Nanos had them in front of me. Nanos had an 11-point lead for the Liberals.
That's
Liaison
huge.
was 2 points.
That's
Poilievre was
huge.
1 point.
Yeah.
MQO had a larger lead. So it still looks like the Liberals are leading in BC, if only by a little bit. They're leading in Ontario by a big margin. They're leading in Quebec by a big margin. They're leading in Atlantic Canada. So yeah, I haven't really seen, like, my projections have been pretty steady.
Yeah.
In that 194 to 198 range for the last little while. It hasn't really budged all that much because every time the Bloc goes up 1 or 2, like the Conservatives go down 1 somewhere else. So it's been kind of balancing it out. So I'm curious to see if anything is going to shift. And also when you put in those extra numbers, whether you get closer to me.
Well, I'm going to get closer to you. But okay, so there's a few things I want to talk about, but I want to ask you specifically on British Columbia. So we had 2 local polls yesterday from BC-based Research Co., Mario Canseco in Vancouver, in Cowichan, Malahat, Langford, and in North Island, Poilievre. So you saw those polls. I know you saw them. The results of these polls did not really surprise me. So a small conservative lead in Cowichan, Malahat, Langford, and a big conservative lead in North Island, Poilievre. I already both had in my projections the conservative leading in there.
Yeah.
However, here's what I wanted to talk to you about. The Liberals were really not doing well in those in those polls, right? And this is not a surprise. We work with proportional swing mostly, and obviously with those numbers that we see for the Liberals in British Columbia, I had the Liberals doing better on Vancouver Island. These 2 regional polls, these 2 local polls, tell me that the Liberals are not doing that better in Vancouver Island, like at all, outside perhaps of Victoria, which would mean that if the Liberals are at 40-ish% in British Columbia and haven't improved in Vancouver Island, you know what that means. That means they're much higher elsewhere. I was told by many people, journalists, local people, no, the Liberals are not doing well in Surrey, they're not doing well in Richmond, they're not doing well in Delta, they're not doing well in the Lower Mainland outside Vancouver. I was like, okay, I believe you if you say so, I'll wait for numbers. Okay, so if the Liberals are not doing well in Vancouver Island, they're not doing well in the Lower Mainland, they have to do well somewhere with these numbers. So, oh yeah, I was also told, the Liberals are nowhere to be found in the interior in the Rockies. It's like, okay. I mean, I think they could win Kelowna. That would not be a stretch.
The thing is, though, I always hear these kinds of things, and maybe they're going to be right. But how would you see these things? Oh, they don't have lots of signs.
Lawn signs. I know, right? But yeah.
Because in part, one of the things with signs is that if a party has lots of resources, they can put up a lot of signs. If they don't have a lot of resources, they don't put up a lot of signs. But it doesn't really mean that the party doesn't have a lot of support that is just going to come out, because it's silent support that isn't all that enthusiastic. We still go back to what happened in NDP in Quebec. I'm pretty sure there wasn't a lot of signs in Quebec, in part because the party didn't have any, that they didn't print any, because they didn't have any resources. They weren't bothering. So when people say stuff like that to me, I always wonder what it actually means. I don't know. I'm not sure how, if the parties themselves are saying it because they're doing the door-to-door, they're doing the regional polling, then that's one thing. But if it's just, I don't see, people with Liberal flags walking around in my town. I mean, that's not how it works. As you said, if they are at 43% in BC, sure, they can run up the numbers in Vancouver, but there's not that many seats just in Vancouver. They have to be doing well in Burnaby. They have to be doing well in New Westminster, in Kelowna, in parts of Vancouver Island, and parts of the Lower Mainland. Like, at some point, it has to be somewhere. It can't be 120% in Vancouver Center.
However, here's what I would push back though. What do you read into these local polls? It seems that NDP support on Vancouver Island has not gone to the Liberals. It's gone to the Conservatives. So if the Liberals are at 40% in the province and in teens on Vancouver Island, that means they're in for a good harvest in the Lower Mainland. So we have to readjust. So when we have local polling like this, it's a chance to readjust. But there's also a chance that the local polling sucks. And so we have to be very careful, right? I trust Research Co. and they know BC, they poll well in BC. And also, to go back to what I just said, those local polls generally align with the projections we already had. I just had the Liberals a little too high there.
For me, the Conservatives were bang on, or more or less to what my projections were already showing. So that does not surprise me. So it would be the extent of the Liberal to NDP transfer of vote in areas particularly where the NDP is the incumbent, and where the race might be against the Conservatives. In Victoria, for example, there might not be the same kind of pressure with the thinking that you have to stick with the party that is the strategic choice and that kind of thing. So maybe you could see more movement in Victoria, in Esquimalt, and places like that. The Liberals were up a little bit in these polls compared to the last election, 2 points in North Island, which is means nothing, 5 points in Cowichan. But you're right, it was a big transfer between the NDP and the Conservatives.
Yeah.
So, but I do wonder if it's very localized to those kinds of places, right? Yeah. So like in the Southern Interior, where they got the Similkameen, South Okanagan riding, maybe that's the same kind of thing happening, where it is more of a blue-orange fight. So you see a lot of the NDP vote has gone to the Conservatives, and the Liberals aren't really in it. You can see like other ridings in the Kootenays and that kind of place where it'd be like that. But in a place like, are those same trends going to hold in Victoria? Are they still going to hold in Surrey? Are they going to hold like that in Burnaby? There, I don't think that those voters who are NDP voters become Conservative voters. In the same way that they would in Vancouver Island, where it's traditionally always has been an orange-blue fight.
Yeah, that's a good point. Also, that provincial election in BC, there's a realignment going on there, so we can't completely ignore it. I'm having trouble to see. The thing is, the federal Liberals, did so well in Surrey. Look at those results from recent election with Justin Trudeau. And if the Liberals go from 27% in BC, what they had in 2021, to the 40s, how the hell do you lose those seats?
Right.
That's the thing. Even if the support is softer and it has not increased, but it's a massive gain for the Liberals in BC if they go from 27 to 40 or 42. That's 15 points. That's huge. So I don't know, but right now BC is the biggest mystery to me.
We've said this many times.
And it's still true. It's still true when we get more and more polls. We see lots of variation. Those local polls were very helpful. Thank you, ResearchCo. But at the same time, go like, oh man, what's going on in the interior?
How about we talk about another set of regional numbers?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think you might know these numbers. They were commissioned by you from Palace in the GTA outside of Toronto. I know you've gotten some pushback on. When you and I talk about the GTA, we usually mean the 30 or so ridings running from Burlington all the way over to Oshawa and Durham. We're not really talking about the ridings in Toronto itself, which we all kind of assume probably going to be 24-24 for the Liberals based on
maybe York Centre has a chance. Maybe York Centre. I'll give you. But aside from that, it should be. I mean, I know people said what's the new name of the park? High Park. I forget the new name of it. Sorry.
Tayakanon, I think.
Tayakanon?
Tayakanon Parkdale High Park.
That's right. I know that the NDP did well there, but we've seen such poor numbers for the NDP in Toronto, so I'm just following the data. Don't be mad at me because I don't put the NDP competitive in those seats. Yes, so Palace data. I commissioned that poll. Palace did really well in Ontario, and so I asked him. I asked Joseph Engolano, the CEO of Palace, I want a poll just of the suburbs. Well, suburbs, the area, so the GTA. So the results were kind of surprising to me. When I got the results, when I got the poll report and I looked at it, I went to check what I had already in the GTA. And the result from the whole region was 48 Liberal, 41 Conservative. And when I looked, and 5 NDP. And when I looked at my projection, I had 49 Liberal, 41 Conservative, and 5 NDP. It was identical. Like I had the Liberals a tiny little bit too high in the GTA, but well within the margin of error. And so what's interesting is when you look at the breakdown from the previous election, the Liberals actually won the GTA by 8.5 points. It was not it was not a domination. It was a clear win, but it was not a domination. So with the NDP support cut in half with respect to 2021, the margin between the Conservatives and Liberals is still the same, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, and the results across the region were pretty interesting because the Liberal gains were primarily in Durham, where the Conservatives have a lot of seats, like Bowmanville, North Oshawa. That's it was Aaron O'Toole's old seat back in the day.
Yeah.
That the Liberals had made some gains there, and they had also made gains in Simcoe and Dufferin counties, which are, pretty far into the GTA and pretty safe for the Conservatives usually. And to see the gains there, and then the Conservatives had made their gains primarily in the Western GTA, so Peel and Halton. But when I ran the numbers, I took your numbers and I compared them to where things were last time. The swings weren't really enough to change a lot of seats. If I was being generous and giving the tosses to the party that closed the gap, I had 3 gains for the Conservatives and 3 gains for the Liberals.
Really?
So,
wow. Okay.
based on those numbers, and as you said, the GTA-wide numbers were pretty similar to what they were last time.
Yeah.
Maybe one of the parties would come ahead 1 seat, maybe 2 than where they were last time, but that's it. There's not a lot of change there. Like they're leading by
14 points in Peel in the Halton.
Yeah. Like that's a bit of a big deal if you're
That's
still
Halton,
leading
sorry,
in
not-
Mississauga and Brampton.
Yeah, sorry, not Halton. 14 points in Peel and Durham. It was 7 points in Halton. But yeah, it's still significant, right? And I mean, of course, the sub-region numbers, they're smaller samples, but I mean, they were like 200 cases. That's more cases than we get in a federal poll from Alberta. So it's still statistically significant. And also, it shows you that the Conservatives have not lost support in the GTA, but they have not gained much. So if they do make a few net pickups, it's a handful, right? It won't be half of it. And the reason, I mean, because I had a budget to commission a poll and I didn't want a national poll. We get plenty of national polls, of federal polls. And so I hesitated, and my 3 choices were Vancouver, Edmonton, and the GTA. Edmonton would have been fun. Vancouver would have just confused me even more, right? So I figured, why not go with the region where the Conservatives absolutely, imperatively have to do better to win. And we see that they're not. They're doing good. 40% in the GTA is good. It's not enough.
And that's always the story everywhere, right? They're doing better in most places of the country than they did last time, but so are the Liberals.
Yeah.
And so whatever gains that the Conservatives make relative to 2021, the Liberals are also making the same gains. Doesn't change a lot of seats. Because in Ontario, they're at 38% in my average. That's above from where they were last time. So yeah, to be up a little bit in the GTA makes sense. But again, if the Liberals are also up and maybe the margins in some of those ridings come down a little bit, but if they're still winning the 12 seats, I think there's 12 seats now in Mississauga and Brampton.
Yeah.
If the Conservatives can't afford that.
Yeah, if it's 10-2 for the Liberals, it's just not enough. They had to, I don't want to say sweep, but they had to near sweep Mississauga and Brampton, right? Mm-hmm. So, okay. Would you like to talk a bit about our projection? I have a few questions for you.
Go ahead.
You remember the last time we compared our projections? I think the largest difference was in Alberta. What's your latest in Alberta, Eric? I want to know.
So right now I have a 31-point lead for the Conservatives in Alberta. That wins them, for me, 30 seats, 6 for the Liberals, 1 for the NDP.
Okay, so we've gotten closer. I have 32 seats for the Conservatives, 4 for the Liberals, and 1 for the NDP. But one is Edmonton Strathcona, unsurprisingly. But I have Griesbach very close. It could remain NDP. I mean, it was interesting to see Rachel Notley there. Rachel Notley campaigning for the NDP MP in Griesbach. So I could see the NDP keeping that second seat in Alberta, but I don't see any gains there. It was suggested to me that the NDP could win Edmonton Centre, and I says, really? Really? Like, okay, show me your data, because because I don't see that. So yeah. So you had 6 seats, 8 seats in Alberta, which felt a bit high. Now you have 6, I have 4, but I have them competitive in 8 seats. So if the Liberals overperform, 6 or 7 or maybe 8 is not out of the question, which would be interesting. But
Yeah. And then BC, I still got 23 Liberals, 19 Conservatives, 1 NDP. But I got 0 to 3 for the NDP. So they are in range of a handful of seats. So East, Vancouver Kingsway. And I think the third one might be New Westminster.
New Westminster,
If in my super high range for them, I have up to 6, so that's where they're a bit more competitive. Let's say they hold on to Victoria or a couple other seats in the area. But yeah, what do you have for the Liberals in BC?
BC, I have 21 Conservative, 19 Liberal.
Okay, there's a divergence.
3 NDP. So the difference, I think, is you have 1 NDP and I have 3. And those NDP seats that I have are Liberal in your projections, so that's the difference. So the NDP polled better in BC in recent days. I'm not sure. I mean, the local polls we had on Vancouver Island shows that the NDP vote there has held a little bit, but also has shed to the Conservatives. I don't think we can transfer that knowledge, those numbers from Vancouver Island. You can't transfer that to the rest of the province, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have 3 NDP seats on Vancouver, the ones you mentioned. But also my range goes all the way to 0. I mean, it would not take much for the NDP if they underperform, which they sometimes do federally, to lose them all. But I have 3 for now. All toss-ups, obviously.
Okay.
Well, not Vancouver. Vancouver East is not a toss-up; it's a leaning. So, but okay, interesting. What about what do you have in Ontario now?
Ontario, I got 84 for the Liberals, 35 for the Conservatives, 2 for the NDP, 1 for the Greens.
35 for the Conservative. So basically the same score as Abram O'Toole. Yep. Wow, that's incredible.
Well, like I said, with those numbers you had for the GTA, that would be the place where they would make the gains, and doesn't suggest that they would make them. So if they don't happen there, where else are they going to happen? They're not going to happen anywhere. Yeah. And especially like the NDP seats that they still have, they had a dissolution. Kind of the Liberals could pick them up, not rather than the Conservatives, based on where things are in the numbers, right? So if the NDP drops in Windsor and London and Hamilton, probably going to the Liberals rather than the Conservatives, just based on where things are.
Absolutely. In Ontario, I have 82 for the Liberals. What did you say you have? 84?
84, yeah.
Okay, we're close. I have 37 for the Conservative, 2 NDP, 1 Green. So yeah, okay, interesting. In Quebec, I have 42 Liberal now. And with this morning's numbers, it looks like it will be stable, maybe come down a little bit. I mean, the bloc was staring at the abyss of maybe winning 14 seats at some point. If they win 25 or 26... I
had them down to 16 at one point.
So you did 16, yeah? I mean, if François Blanchet says, well, we managed to save the furniture, we have 25 seats. I mean, it would be losses compared to dissolution. But there was a point in this campaign where you wonder, okay, is the bloc getting to that 12-seat threshold? It was possible. I don't think... I would be very surprised if it goes down low now at this point. So, okay. Interesting.
So some small little differences, and we'll see how things line up by the end.
We'll see who's wrong.
Yeah, we'll see who's right. We'll see who's wrong, and we'll see if both of us are wrong, which is... It's very unlikely we'll both be right, which is unfortunate.
Well...
Unless we have the same numbers. We should collude. No, we won't do that.
No, we won't do that.
Okay, how about a riding? Do you got one?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
It's just, I think as I forgot which ridings I did before, and so I'm kind of afraid
I will remind you if you're doing one that you've already done.
Oh, man. I wanted to do a one in Manitoba. Kildonan, St. Paul's.
Okay, yeah.
I don't think I did it, right?
No, I don't think so.
This is a very close race. And now we should mention that the Conservatives have won this handily in 2021. If we take the redistributed data, they won this by 14 points. The thing is, the NDP was at 24% in that riding. And so, considering the numbers we saw in Manitoba, and more specifically in Winnipeg, if half that NDP vote goes to the Liberals, it's a toss-up. And so perhaps this could be a pickup for the Liberals from the Conservatives if it does happen. So NDP voters basically hold the key here. It's a toss-up for me between the Liberals and Conservative, looking to see what happens in Winnipeg there.
I have it as well, and it's one of those ridings that I don't think people think will be that close, but the numbers are the numbers, and it wasn't that big of a win, as you said. So my riding will be, we'll go back to BC, because that's where we spent a lot of time today, and that's where Jagmeet Singh is spending some time. He's in Port Moody, so I'm going to go to Port Moody, Coquitlam. So this is a riding that's in the Lower Mainland. It's east of Vancouver, and it is traditionally a pretty close race. And in the last election, the NDP had 35%, the Conservatives had 32%, and the Liberals had 29%.
Wow.
So it was a three-way race.
Yeah.
It's one of these ridings where it seems like it should be tough for the NDP to hold because they don't have to lose a lot. I mean, if the incumbent is able to hold on to their vote, it's not going to make that big of a difference because they can drop just a teeny little bit, and it's going to cost them the seat, right? So that's Benita Zarillo, who is the NDP incumbent there. So is it going to be a Liberal-Conservative fight? Will that NDP vote hold on enough to keep it a bit of a three-way race? I think it is going to be a really interesting one, and going to be one of those kind of things that's going to tell us a lot about what's going to happen in BC. But wow. I do think the province is going to be one of the most interesting ones. All the other provinces, you can kind of see the patterns. It seems like it's going to be pretty clear, but in BC, I think it could be the ones that has the most amount of surprises for us.
Oh, yeah. And I look at that's a good call. Very good call. Port Moody, Coquitlam. It was 35 NDP, 32 Conservative, and just under 30 for the Liberals. So if the NDP even loses 10% of its support, not 10 points, 10% of its support, they lose it. Yeah. And so, great call. Good writing.
Okay. Well, that'll be it for this episode. We're going to be back later this week with our last public episode before the election, I guess. That's true. Right. And we are going to have on our special episode on the weekend, we're going to do more of a deep dive into the election map and make some of our, not our final calls, but getting closer to our final calls. Because we're going to do that on Sunday night or Monday morning. But anyway, so if you want to listen to that episode, join our Patreon and join our Discord where we have discussions on politics with lots of engaged users. You can go to thenumberspod.ca and to join us, and we would appreciate your support. So Philippe, until next time, we'll chat later in this week. Hope the next few days go well for you, and looking forward to the next time we can chat.
Absolutely. Merci beaucoup, Eric. Merci beaucoup, tout le monde. Have a great week.